This is the Think Big for the Verified Testing Group for September 22nd, 2020. First off, happy release day, everyone. It's 13.4 release. Yay. Second, we're switching up the format just a little bit this month, just because we did have some light participation, some well-deserved PTO happening in the group. So instead of a Think Big, Think Small pairing this week and next week, we're going to just kind of go back over kind of a review of what we talked about so far, and looking at the long-term vision and the active epics and how those two things map together, to make sure that we are thinking big about the right things and thinking small about those things that move us in the right direction. So I'm going to go ahead and start by just sharing my screen and looking at some designs that Juan's been working on for us. Share that. So we have we've been working on some designs for a 1 and a 3-year vision for the category overall. Just where do we want to go? What's our North Star? What's going to help us move that paid group monthly active user number forward, based on what we know today and what we think we're going to validate in the not too distant future. So Juan and I have been going through this process for a couple of months. We first started by identifying what we kind of heard as we looked through issues, and based on the conversations that we've had, were kind of underlying or undercurrent of problems that customers were having. What are those big 3 to 5 problems that all of the feature requests kind of lead up to or sum up? And where we settled is really around hotspots in code. Tell me about where there's problems that I'm not seeing yet, usually through static analysis, and we see that as an underlying current of a lot of the code quality requests. Which tests are flaky, and we just have an issue for that, but it's a very popular issue. We've talked about this a lot, of tests, sometimes fail, sometimes pass. Help me identify those so that I can fix them and get more green pipelines. Which projects are costing the most? There's a little bit of undercurrent there. This is more in talking with the customers, less in the issues, of trying to help them understand where are they spending on their testing, and is it a good return on that investment for them. And then finally, which projects have tests pass in testing and failing in production? We think that, and this goes beyond tests, but we think that there's an interesting problem to solve around what does my software do in my testing and staging and pre-production environments versus what it's doing in production. And how do I start to map those two things together so that I can see, hey, this test that's always failing in pre-prod is always passing in production, or vice versa, so that you can start to identify issues that are actually going to show up out in your production environment faster. So there's some problems there that we want to dig into. So then we talked through the workflows of these one day, and I think we have a recording of that user story mapping, or just that discussion, that I can link back to, and settled on a couple of things to try to work through how someone would go to answer these questions or try to solve those problems within the app. And now let's just get to the actual interesting stuff, the design. So Juan put together some just forward-looking wireframes. These are low fidelity on purpose. We anticipate that this changes quite a bit as we go through the actual validation of these problems. But a lot of this should look familiar because it rolls up a lot of what we've been working on over the last 12 months already, and putting all of that into a singular data view for a project, or a singular data view for a group. That's where we think there's really a value add for those customers who have multiple projects across their groups. And you could then, in turn, easily see this rolling up to an instance for those self-hosted folks of, hey, across all of my groups, where is quality good, where is quality not so good? So testing analytics, lots of great stuff in here that plays off of the accessibility score, the code quality scores, just how long is it taking to run tests, and what's my test coverage look like? And then it gets interesting down here with the charts. So you can start to see how that data is trending over time. And this is something that we've already started looking at. Today is the first release of the code coverage for groups. So we're starting to roll that data up already. So you can see we're already heading in this direction. But some new fun, interesting stuff here of being able to pick and choose and compare projects of what is trending over time, kind of making these charts a little more interactive. and then some test coverage hotspots. We have some really fun stuff, just ideas that Juan was playing around with of what could this look like? What do competitors do? You know, what do we think would solve problems for the customers? So I'm going to keep clicking through, but want to start answering any questions from the team. Things that you spot that, hey, that looks really cool. Hey, why is that there in the first place? Hey, here's a thing you missed. Lay it on me. Blown away by the awesomeness that is the screenshots, I can tell.
This is the first time I've seen this design. It looks pretty cool. I'll probably just take some time after the meeting to look through them and dive in a little more. There's a lot of information on this design.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. I'm going to jump into the last three then. So we start talking, or as we were talking about this, we wanted to give you data initially, and that's kind of our one-year vision of a lot of the groundwork that we've laid, or a lot of the features that we've built in the last 12 months. Let's start to sum those up and give you a data view of those so that they're actionable beyond just within a merge request, that you can start to plan against the data. The other bit, as we start thinking forward beyond that, is within your MR, we tell you about stuff, but then we don't really give you a way to do anything with it. So in the short term, in like the 12 to 18 month time frame, we think a great next step is to start to say, hey, here are code quality problems. Start to create issues from those. You can do that from the MR. And then a view to, and we don't have a visualization of this, but a view to start to track those things so that if you as a developer are working through a merge request and you see a code quality issue, you don't see a way to create an issue, you see an already tracked issue for it, so that we can start to tie those things together and you can say, hey, somebody already started looking at this, they have an open MR, can I grab that code and put it into mine as well and resolve this problem because I'm more familiar with this, or can I go close out that issue if I'm more familiar with this thing? So starting to incorporate that. And that's something that the security team has started to build on already, so that you can track security issues and that you can see those from the code quality, or the security widgets rather. So then beyond that 18-month time frame, we think it'd be really, really interesting to start to just allow or start to figure out what the fix would be. So I think especially around code quality, we have a lot of, or we'll be able to gather a lot of data of the same type of failure, the same type of issue across code bases, especially the open source code bases, or just within your group or your project if it's a private project. And start to look at, well, here's all of the places where this type of problem has shown up. And then here's all of the issues that were tied to it, the subsequent merge requests where it was fixed. And it looks like all of these kind of look the same. Can we then take that data and start to suggest to you, hey, here's a problem, here's how you would fix it, because here's how you fixed it 20 times before, you being the larger group. And start to enable someone to look at an MR and that fixes it, and just apply it right there without having to go through and make the fix themselves, especially if it's something that has already been done 20, 30, 40 times within a project or across a group or across an instance. So we think that that would be, like, that's the next step in the evolution of this. And Juan's kind of started to sum that up in some of these last couple of wireframes here. But that's just one step on the 3-year vision. Yeah. Any thoughts, any ideas there?
So the idea for picture 6 is basically that you're viewing a failed test and you click a button saying create an issue based on this failed test, and then it would automatically like fill it out. Okay.
Yeah. So give it to you, then we can grab the history of it so you can start to see, hey, this is flaky, this is not flaky. link back into those pipelines, be able to collect some data. Yeah. And then you can start to tie those. We can, in the test history report, start to say, hey, this flaky test has this open issue to resolve its flakiness, de-dander it, whatever you want to say. And the same sort of thing with code quality issues in there as well.
Yeah, that's great. I like that.
It helps replace, I think the quality group has their own project that tracks every test and the history of it, and they use that then to create issues and link to if something goes flaky. And it's this massive project with thousands and thousands of issues in it that a bot is manually going and finding and updating based on test runs.
So what is the connection? I'm sure this is more technical detail. How is the merge request widget supposed to detect like, oh, there's already an issue for this? Is there like, when an issue gets created automatically, is there some like label or some underlying like data that is kept there to say this is related, or is it like text-based, like it's searching for that file in a issue subject?
Absolutely no idea. It's all, unicorn magic to me.
Okay, sounds good. I was just curious if that was already thought out.
Nope. It'll probably be a very manual piece to start of, I have a test failure. So here is a singular failure for a singular test case. I want to mark that as flaky because looking at the history of the test execution, I can see it's flapping. And then I think that there would just be the issue is tied to the case. At that point, we'll probably have some sort of database for cases, and you can start to tie in, here's an issue that's tied to the case. You might need some sort of table that links all of those things together, but it's, thinking about how it would work, we have to solve for the test history data problem first. And once we do that, then we can start to talk about, all right, how do we store issues that link back to tests?
Cool. Sounds good.
Cool. So yeah, I'll link to this stuff in the agenda. Let's go ahead and look at then. I don't know why I stopped my share because I'm just going to go to the other tab. So that's kind of the think big of where we want to go. And I'm going to start to work screenshots of those into the direction pages so that it all links back together. And I'll share, I think I already shared with the team the video of Juan and I walking through these and ideating even a little bit more of some cool stuff that we think we could do. So to get there though, we have a number of epics that are currently being worked on or are next up for validation, things that we know we need to build to get there, or we think we need to build to get there. I don't know that these active epics are actually in this correct order by when they'll start or when they'll finish anymore, because the last time when I made this list was like 3 months ago, and things have changed since then, it turns out. But the rough order of stuff, I think, is wrapping up the code coverage data for groups, which, like I said, first parts of that are shipping today. That is a premium tier feature. There's only one item left in our unit test report, CI view enhancements. There's been tons of great work there. I think it's made that report so much more usable. The sort order being better, the buggy scrolling getting fixed up, all sorts of great stuff there. Test history for MRs and pipelines. That's our MVC approach to test history. I know Eric's been working really hard on solving the data storage part of that, or helping with the discussion there. I'm trying to figure out how are we going to store these things? Is it Redis key? Is it something else? So that it's still performant enough to learn. And then knowing that we'll probably, or knowing that we will, not probably, but that we will throw that away in the not too distant future. That once we figure it out, is this valuable or not? And how much data are we looking at actually storing? And then going down the database route for test data for projects and test data for groups. So that's some of the stuff that's coming up next. In our internal stakeholder meeting later this week, I'll reference the code quality viability, or code quality moving to viable plan. That's a mix of things we've heard from customers and things we've heard from internal stakeholders. And that starts to build out a lot of the data that you saw in those mocks, or better exposing it to the front end and making the code quality feature set just a lot more valuable, and less noise, I would say, than what it is today. Because you can see, 35 violations. You don't know if those are violations you added or those are violations somebody else added that have been there for 3 years, or if they're super high critical priority, or they're just linting errors that are optional to fix. So solving some of those problems is key in that. Beyond that, I mean, we're talking about 6 months out potentially of working on some of these other things. So don't want to dig too far into those, but happy to click through and look at any of the epics if these are unfamiliar or not jogging in memory for you all. Let me zoom in a little bit too. There we go. I see everybody doing this.
Mhm.
So are there things missing based on the design that we looked at, the vision that we've talked through, that we're not yet building or aren't a building block to get to where we're going? I've got all this stuff arranged in my head in a certain way that it totally makes sense. We're totally building the right stuff. So I know I have blind spots and I'm just missing something.
I wish I had some awesome feedback for you.
No worries. I will take as a takeaway from this discussion today for all of our think bigs, especially the next time we do this format, to give the team more than 4 seconds to think about this stuff when I put you on the spot. I know it's a big meaty topic, so asking you for immediate feedback is not very fair at all. While you're pondering that, I'll bring up the topic that I tweeted about yesterday and what I'm going to talk about in the cross stage think big a little bit on Thursday. The idea of using an error budget or just error rates. And as those increase or as your error budget gets smaller, if that's the model that a team is following, that the reaction to that is like slow down deployments potentially, which is what the primary action is, but also to increase stringency of test requirements so that someone could say, as we get closer to our air budget being gone, our uptime, how much downtime we can have for the rest of the iteration shrinking, the requirements of testing can start to go up. So instead of saying, hey, test coverage for the project has to stay above this threshold, to test coverage for your MR has to stay above this threshold, to test coverage for your MR has to increase. Those kinds of things. That's probably not the greatest example, but increasing stringency in the test requirements before an MR will get merged as that error budget shrinks. Starting to tie together some of the observability data that we can get back to the pipeline. That's what I'm thinking big about lately. Anyone want me to click in, answer any questions about any of the epics?
Would it help if maybe identify if you're missing any epics or issues. So like maybe um, go into this each mockups or designs and maybe comment on which area would be handled by which epic.
Yeah, I don't know that we have 100% match between what's in these yet and the actual epics that are out there. That'll be the next step for me, is to start to tie these designs back to the existing epics based on what we know, and then start to kind of map that in and fill in the blank spots. So like I know that, so test history, we're starting to build out today. Coverage, we will finish building out in the next milestone or two, so that that data will become available to us. There's an ongoing discussion within the entire verify stage with the runner and the two CI groups about how do we start to get some data around job statistics and metrics of how long they're taking to run. And once we do that, we can identify more readily the testing jobs, things that are at least labeled with the stage, and be able to pull that data. As we start looking at the code quality epic and moving the maturity of that, we may have to figure out some of our own funky grading systems for taking what we know about those code quality violations and turning them into some of this data. And none of this is meant to be prescriptive. This is just what Juan and I came up with that we thought would be helpful. None of it's been validated. So we shouldn't necessarily make draw a straight line from this will require this, because we haven't validated that this stuff in the report is actually valuable or solves any problems for anybody. Based on competitor reviews and what we're hearing, we think that this gets us going in the right direction, but we'll definitely validate that. And I'd expect to follow on epic, or at least a couple of issues to follow what we're going to work on next in code quality to build out some of this data. Accessibility, I think that we have most of this. We may need some things just to grab the data, be able to grab the data, maybe even store the data, and look at that over time. And then endpoint latency, I don't remember exactly what the use case was for this, but it'll be something that we can talk with Juan about and see if that's even something that we have existing today through the monitoring group and some of their data.
Is it tied to like site speed?
Oh, you know what? You're probably right. That probably ties into browser performance. Endpoint latency might not be the best labeling there, but again, we haven't validated anything, so. It's a good call out though. I'm really interested in the idea of churn, kind of three stats: churn, quality, and coverage, and presenting some sort of view of those three things for every file in a repository, so that as a team lead or as a release manager or whatever, you can start to see, hey, these files have been changed, for this release. Here's their quality, their coverage, and just their overall churn. Like, is there a lot of code being changed in this all the time? And what do those three things, based on with the levels that they're at, tell you about the riskiness of releasing that MR out into the wild, or the need to have some tech debt paid down in some of these areas? So a high churn, low test coverage area may need some better attention or some more tests in it, versus a low test coverage but high quality and low churn file. Like, well, we never touch it, it's got high quality, doesn't matter if we had tests there. Maybe those kind of signals we can start to pull out in a view. Cool. Well, things to ponder. Thanks for the feedback so far, and by all means, jump into the issue, comment on that. I just linked in the agenda here. Leave comments in the agenda too. Would love to get your feedback there, any of the epics, as always. And we'll be back to our regularly scheduled and formatted Think Big, Think Small in, I think, about 3 weeks or so, 4 weeks or so. So please jump in, upvote the issues that are there, create new issues for things you want to talk about. Right now, I think coverage reports is next up, unless we get a groundswell of support for another topic.
Awesome.
All right.
Thank you, as always.
Great talking to y'all. Everyone have a great day. Cheers.